Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Motion. In today's video, we're going to be making this. Now, I made this video a couple of months ago without any intention of creating a tutorial from it, but thanks to this guy, we're going to be seeing a tutorial about it now. So we're going to be starting this off in After Effects, bringing in our video. The video you can download from the description below. We're going to track our camera inside of After Effects and export everything to a Cinema 4D readable file. Then we can open that up in Cinema, where we're going to put in our spheres and create some geometry that are going to replicate our rocks that exist in the real video footage. We're going to get our lighting right, and we're going to get our shadows looking as best we can. Then we're going to be jumping back into After Effects, tidying up any loose ends, adding some nice finishing touches. So let's get started on this. Here we go. Okay guys, so we're going to be starting this off in After Effects, and we're just going to import in the video. So the video, you can go to this website here, Mitch Martinez. He provides a load of 4K videos that you guys can download and use. Just check I think it's the terms of use there for how your rights and what you're able to do with these videos. So I'm going to give you the link for this website. It's in the description below. And the video we're going to be using is here in Landscape, and it's Landscape 08, that one here. So I'm going to bring this into After Effects. So just double click in the project panel there, and then we can import in that video. Let's just drag this down to this icon here, this composition icon, and release. And there is our video. So that is it. So we want to cut off the logo here at the end. We don't want that in our scene. So I'm just going to scrub to just about there where it cuts and hit N on my keyboard. That's going to set the work area end, and then just hit Shift, Control, and X to trim the comp to the work area. So now we just have this part of the video. Okay. So I'm just going to hit Control K on my keyboard and just take note of the frame rate, which is this. We're just going to have to reflect that when we're setting up our scene Cinema 4D. So now we can track the camera. So let's go to animation and track camera. And that's going to do its thing. It's going to take a bit of time. So I'm going to pause the video here, and we'll come back to this in a second. Cool. Okay, so that's finished doing its thing. So what we can do now is, you might not be able to see this panel. If you can't, it probably is over here on your screen. So what you need to do is just click on your effects tab here, and then you can just drag that over, and then you'll be able to get that there over there. So you can see that we have the track points. We can make those bigger so we get a better picture of them. And if we just scrub through this, you can see that our track points are following along with our shot. So this is the area we're going to have our balls that are going to be jumping up and down. So we're going to try and find a nice target here. So something like that. Let's scrub a bit more. Yeah, so I'm going to go for this one here. Something like that. So what I did was I just hovered over an area until the target looked like it was sitting on top of the rocks, and then I just clicked my mouse. Now we can right click and go to Create Solid and Camera. So that's going to create a solid there, and also our camera is going to be created with that. So we can watch that from beginning to end, and that's a pretty decent track. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to save our After Effects file. So let's just go and do that now. and I want to save this to my landscape compositing folder. Call this tracked cam and just save that there. Now we want to export this so that we can bring it into Cinema 4D and we can start adding in our balls. So let's do that now. Go to File, Export, and max on Cinema 4D Exporter. Just click OK to that message. And let's save this to the same folder, which is actually just left it there for a second. So I'm going to call this cam track and save that out. Now if we jump into Cinema, we can open that up. And here it is. So there's our track solid there. I think it's called track solid. Yeah, our track solid 1 is there, and our camera is there. So you can see our camera is moving along as it is in our actual footage. So let's just jump into that camera again. I didn't mean to press that. Let's jump into that. And now we have our scene ready to set up our balls. So we need to create a background object, and this is, we're going to use this, we're going to apply a material that's going to have our video inserted into it. So let's just create a new material, open that up. We can call this background video. Let's turn off color and reflectance. We're going to put this into the luminance channel. Let's go to load image here. And let's find our folder. And here's our video. So if I just jump into this thumbnail here and go to the animation tab, we need to make sure that our frame rate is set up in our actual project settings as well. So just Control C this, copy that, open up our render settings, and let's go to, okay, so it's already done it for us automatically. Brilliant. Good old Cinema knew exactly what to do for us in that case. So that's perfect, that's good to go. Now we can apply this material to our background object. And now what we need to do, you can see that our video isn't actually playing. So we need to open up our material again, go to editor here and just turn on animate preview. Now you can see that our video is playing and everything's looking as it should. Okay, cool. So now we can go and create our balls. So let's just create a sphere. And we can, so we don't really know where it is. You can tell by this arrow that it's over there somewhere. So it's at world center in our cinema scene. It's at 0, 0, 0. Now we want it to be where our rocks are, where our track solid is. So what we can do is just make our sphere a child of the track solid, and then we can use this reset PSR. That'll align it to its parent, which is the track solid in this case. Now if you can't see this reset PSR button, just hit Shift C to open up your command search, type in PSR, and then just make sure you drag that up to your tool panel there. So you'll be able to use that again. So you can just click and drag it up and make sure you have it so we'll be able to use that again. So just hit escape to close the command search, and then I'm going to hit the reset PSR button. Now our sphere is aligned with our track solid. We can drag that so it's no longer a child of the track solid, and this is just going to be called ball. So if we go into the object tab, radius is 100, that's fine. So let's just bring this up a little bit, and we need to clone these balls, clone this ball now. So let's go to MoGraph and get a cloner object, just drag that down, and let's make the ball a child of the cloner. and let's see, we need to, so again our cloner's jumped to world center in cinema, so what we need to do is just bring this up to be a child of the track solid, reset PSR again, then we can bring that back out. Now we have our cloner, and we need to change the mode to grid array. And let's change the count here, so we can increase the amount we have. We can go for, let's go for 9 on the X, 5 on the Y. We can leave the Z at 3. And we need to also make our balls dynamic. So let's right click on our cloner object, go to simulation tags and grab a rigid body tag. Now if we hit play, well, nothing's actually happening. Our balls are falling down, so they are reacting to gravity, but we want them to all react separately to gravity, not as one single object. So go into your rigid body tag, go to the collision tab, let's set individual elements to all, and now let's see that again. Now you can see that they're all flying off into space separately. They're all reacting to gravity separately as separate objects. Great. So, hang on a second, somebody's calling me. I'm going to cancel that. Let me actually just turn on airplane mode on my phone so that doesn't happen again. Okay. So, what are we doing now? Okay, so right now all of our spheres or all of our balls are kind of flying off into space. But we don't want them to do that. We want them to kind of stick around this area. So what we can do is go into our rigid body tag, go to the, let's see, collision, is it force? Yeah, and we can turn up follow position. We'll go for 10 on that. And let's hit play on that. Now you can see that our balls are going to be sticking around. They're going to stick around the position that they originate at, which is great. So now we have our cloned spheres. What we need to do now is we need to, I suppose what we could do is just start setting it up so that they're bouncing up and down. And we also need, well, we can hide off this track solid. We don't want to see that. We also need to set it up so that they're going to be able to hit these rocks. Now we don't have any rocks yet, so we're going to create some geometry that are going to act as our rocks. So let's go ahead and create some geometry right now. So I'm going to create a sphere and I'm going to call this rock. And this is going to be our rock. So we need to position this. Straight away you can see it's gone off to, you know, world center in our Cinema 4D scene. So let's do the same thing we did, make it a child of our track solid 1. And then we can reset the PSR there and let's bring that back down so it's no longer a child of the track solid. So let's just deactivate the camera here so we can have a look and see where this is. So it's right under our balls, which is fine. But you can see that this rock is going to be a little bit behind our balls. So if I just activate the camera there, you can see that it's behind our balls ever so slightly and over to the left here. And let's bring it back also behind our balls. So now let's resize this, and we're going to do this inside of object mode as opposed to model mode. So we're going to be able to scale it any way we want. We can scale it like that and like that. Just going to scale it all up. I'm just clicking anywhere in my scene and I'm just clicking and dragging. I'm also going to rotate this to kind of match up the orientation a bit more with our rock, our real rock. Now again, this is just me eyeballing this as best as I can. So you guys can do the same. So we want to make it a bit thicker. Something like that, maybe.
and just bring it down so it's lining up with that rock. And now we need some more rocks all along the bottom here. So I'm just going to create another sphere. Or no, I won't. I'll just duplicate this one here. So Control C, Control V. That'll give us another rock. We can bring this one down, and I'm going to try and rotate this to match up with the orientation of these rocks. They're kind of facing in a different direction, you can see. So I'm just going to hit R on my keyboard and rotate that. Go back into scale and maybe just make it a bit thinner or thicker. Again, I'm just eyeballing this, trying to match it up with our real rocks. Deactivate my camera. This has to go forward a bit because it's actually, you can see that this rock is in front of this rock. So I'm bringing it forward a bit. And then activating my camera again, and I'm going to line it up a bit more closely. Now I'm going to hold down Control and just hover over this axis handle here and just click and drag to duplicate that. Maybe I'll scale this along the X. And then I'm going to hit spacebar. You can use spacebar to switch between currently selected tool and previously selected tool. So I'm going to hit spacebar, go back to my move tool, hold down Control, and I'm going to duplicate this as well. Maybe I'll scale this out a bit, and I will make it a bit bigger along the y-axis here. Something like that. I'm going to duplicate this one, so now I'm going to try and match it up with this rock here. So something like this. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, eyeballing this, eyeballing the hell out of it is what we're trying to do here. And yeah, I think that is okay. If we just jump into our top view and hit S on your keyboard, make sure one of your objects is selected in your object manager. Make sure your mouse is hovering over the viewport. Hit S on your keyboard, that'll focus in on the selected object. So you can see that our balls are kind of, they're not actually directly on top of our rocks, so let's make sure that they are. We can just bring our cloner object. Now we're in object mode. We need to be in model mode to move this. So go back to model mode. Let's move the clone. Oh, it's not letting me for some reason. It's because I have this simulation tag attached to it, so it's not going to let me move it. So what we need to do is we can disable that, and then no, we still can't move it. So we're going to have to, I'm going to enable that again. Let's just bring this simulation tag up to one of our rocks for now. Then we'll be able to move our cloner to where we want it to be. So if I jump back into perspective, maybe something like, yeah, I'll have it around here, I suppose. Something like there. And back into top view so you can see that it is actually above our rocks. Now we can bring our simulation tag back down to our cloner. And now, if we just watch that, we can see what it's looking like. Okay, so our rocks, we don't know yet if our rocks are good enough to make this believable, but we're going to find out soon enough, and then we can move them around and tweak them as needs be. So right now our balls aren't actually moving, they're just static, they're just not actually doing anything, they're just hovering above the rocks. We want them to be bouncing up and down. So I'm just going to take this simulation tag again back up to the rock so I can move this cloner a bit closer to our rocks. And then let's bring that back down to our cloner. And now what we want to do is grab a vibrate tag, right click, go to Cinema 4D tags, and here is a vibrate tag. Now with this tag we can get some movement in our in whatever object this is attached to, this is applied to. We can get some movement without actually using keyframes. So we can enable position on this, and we want this to move up and down along the Y. So let's bring this up to something like 1200. So that's going to give us some up-down movement along the Y. And frequency, you can leave it at 2. And now we hit play on that. Now you can see we're getting that up and down movement. Now our balls aren't actually colliding with our rocks. We probably need to move our cloner closer to our rocks actually. So let's do that now. I'm going to delete off that vibrate tag, bring our simulation tag up to our rock again. Then I'm going to move this cloner down closer to our rocks, bring the simulation tag back to our cloner, and then re-add that vibrate tag. And let's turn on enable position, and again we'll set this to 0 on the X, 1200 on the Y, and frequency is at 2, that's fine. So let's see that again now in action. Now you can see that our spheres are actually going to interact with our rocks. But right now our rocks don't have, they're not acting as colliders at all. So we need to add a collider tag onto all of our rock objects so that they'll behave like rocks and they'll actually catch our balls as they collide with them. So let's just organize our object manager here a bit. I'm just bringing all our rocks down, and what I can do is select all of them, hit Alt G. That'll group them all into a null, and we can just call that null rocks null. Okay, so we need to select all of our rocks, right click and go to simulation tags, and we can then add a collider body tag. Now if we hit play, our spheres are going to be colliding with our spheres. So our balls are going to be colliding with our rocks. So that's looking good. Now let me just check something here for a second. Okay, so now what we need to do is make our rocks blend in with our background. So we need to create, well, we could use this material and apply it to our rocks, and then it would look like, you know, part of our scene. But we can't use this one because this material won't catch any shadows for us because it's just using the luminance channel. So we need to just make a duplicate of this, and we can call this rocks. And we need to deselect, well, we can copy the shader here. So that's going to basically copy this video. Turn off luminance, go into color, and then paste the shader. So now our video is going to be pasted in. And now this material, because it's in the color channel, because the video is in the color channel, we're going to be able to get some shadows on our rocks. So let's apply this rocks material to our rocks null. And now you can see that all of our rocks are getting the video material applied to them. It still doesn't look good, obviously. So we need to go to our material tag here and set the projection to frontal. Now you can see it's looking a lot better. So if I do a render preview there, that's looking a lot better. Now another thing we need to do is we need to select all of our rocks, go to Cinema 4D tags and add a compositing tag. And let's turn on compositing background. Let's see if that's made much of a difference. Well, it's made a huge difference. You can see the difference that it has made. If I turn this off again, render preview, so that doesn't look very well blended. Turn on compositing background, and now render preview again. That's looking much better. Okay, so now we need to get a bit of lighting in our scene. So we're going to be using a sky object for this. And we're going to be combining this with global illumination. So we can turn that on as well. Go into your render settings, go to effect, turn on global illumination. And yeah, for preset, we leave it as is. We leave the settings as is. Now we need to get material for this. So we just need an image of our scene. Actually, we want to add a compositing tag to this sky object. Cinema 4D tags compositing, and we don't want it to be seen by camera. So now we can see our background again. So we want to just get a frame of this video. We just want to get a frame, and we're going to use that frame as a material that we can apply to our sky object, and that's going to give us our lighting for our scene. So how do we get a frame for this? Go into After Effects. And we can, let's see, we can turn off the camera tracker for the time being. And we can hide the track solid. We don't even need to turn off the 3D camera tracker actually. And we can find a frame that we want to save out. So hopefully it's not going to save out our track points. It shouldn't do. So we'll go to Composition, Save Frame As, File, and then we can go to the output module here and change this to PNG sequence, click OK, and output to, we can pick a destination for this. So I'm just going to go to the folder that I'm in, that all my stuff is in already, and we'll call this sky material. So this is going to be the frame that we're going to be using for our sky material image. So just save that and render. So now that's going to render out this frame as an image. We can jump back into Cinema. Let's just make sure that it didn't actually render out those track points. No, it didn't. So we have our sky material image. Brilliant. So now what we can do is create a new material. We'll call this sky. And we're going to turn off color and reflectance, turn on luminance, and we're going to load in that image that we just saved out. And we can, yeah, we'll leave the brightness as it is for now. We might turn it up later on. So now if we apply this sky material to our sky object, and if we just render preview now you can see that we're getting a bit of lighting. We're actually getting a bit of shadow on our rocks as well. You can see that there. So that's looking pretty cool actually. Straight away, what we can do is create a new material. This can be the material that we're going to be using for our actual balls. So if we just apply this to our ball, we could apply it to our cloner also. Just apply it to our ball object. Let's open that up. And we can turn on reflectance. Well, it's already on. But we can turn off default specular. Let's add a CGX. Set the attenuation to additive. And we can bring the reflection strength down a bit. Bring the specular strength down also. And we want to get a different color for each of our spheres. Well, not a different color for each of our spheres, but just a bit of variation without the trouble of having to, you know, create a separate ball object inside of our cloner and then apply different colors to each one of them. So to do that, we can use a variation shader. So go into your color channel of your sphere material, let's call it, or ball material, let's call it ball. And we can go to this little drop down here, go to effects and variation. Now we have our variation shader added. Let's open that up. And now we need to see, well, let's do a render preview here now. So you can see that we're getting a bit of variation of color. And we're also getting some nice reflection going on as well. It's reflecting our sky object image that we saved out of After Effects. So we want to select different colors. We don't want just blue and white. We actually want something like this. Now, why isn't it giving us this? It's showing us this up there, but it's not giving us this. So the reason for that is we need to turn random color down to 0. And gradient blend, we need to bring that up to 100%. And now we need to change gradient mode to replace. So now if I render preview there, now we're getting a more accurate version of what we're being shown up here. But we're just seeing blue and white and colors in between. So let's click on this drop down here. And then we can load in a different preset. Now you could pick your own colors just by clicking and adding knots there and picking your own colors. It's going to grab a preset. It's going to save us a bunch of time. I'm going to go for maybe this one. That might look nice in our scene. It's kind of like red and rocky color. So I think we need to turn down our reflectance strength a bit more. Yeah, so now that's looking a bit better. We have a bit of reflection, but not so much that it's just killing our color completely. And we're also getting the, we're getting a variation of colors in each of our spheres. So that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do next is, well, let's just have a play of this and see what it's looking like. So that's looking pretty good. But what we could do is we can add a random effector. Is it a random effector? Yeah, we can add a random effector so that we're going to get a bit of randomness in the scale of each of our spheres. So let's grab our cloner object, go to MoGraph Effectors, and let's grab a random object there, random effector. And make sure that you did select the cloner object before you added that in. Otherwise, it's not going to appear here automatically. If you didn't, you can just drag the random effector down into this Effectors tab here under Effectors. But clicking on the cloner object before you add it in just saves you the trouble of having to do that. So now we have a random effector. We can go into parameter, the parameter tab, turn off position, and we're just going to be concerning ourselves with scale. So let's turn on apps, turn on uniform scale, and we can bring this to something like 0.5. Let's see, is that doing anything? It actually isn't for some reason. Oh, it is. Okay. Just had to hit play. So I'm going to go back to 0.5 on that. It actually looked a bit better with a higher value. Maybe, I'll leave it at 1. Something like that. Maybe 0.8. We'll try 0.8. Okay, cool. So I think I'm happy enough with how this is looking now. We do need to brighten up our scene a bit. So what we could do is we can go into our sky object, our sky material, I should say, and we can go into the luminance. We can bring the brightness up to 200. Now this might be a bit much. We'll see. Render preview on that. Is it really brightening up our scene? It isn't really, to be honest. It looks like we're just getting more visibility of our reflected material here. So it looks like the reflection is clear. So I might just bring that back down. I'll just go down to 120. We're probably just going to have to add in a light. We could try a physical sky. Let's see, that'll probably just, we'll see what that looks like. We need to add in a compositing tag. So right click on your physical sky, go to Cinema 4D tags, compositing, and turn off scene by camera. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's a bit too bright. It does look kind of cool, but it is very bright. Let's see if we can just bring down the intensity of this, maybe down to 65%. See if that looks any better. It's okay. I don't think I like it though. I think I'm just going to use a light for this. So let's create a light object, and we want to turn on shadows for this. So I'm going to use area shadows for it. And again, it's jumped over to the world center of our scene. So we need to make it a child of the track solid and reset the PSR. That'll align it to our track solid, which isn't visible anymore. I made it invisible with these little visibility dots here. I don't know what they're called, to be honest. And then I'm going to just drag our light back up to the top of our object manager. Okay, so now we have our light, and we can position this so that our shadows are going to be to the right of our balls. And the reason we want them to be to the right is because the shadow here is also to the right of this giant rock. So that's where we want our shadows to be for our balls also. So let's jump into the top view. And we need to bring our light over to the left. and we can jump into our 4-way view, and what we can do is with our light selected, and bring your mouse down to any one of your viewports, hit Alt S, and that will focus the light on each of our viewports. Now we don't want it to do it for perspective, so we're going to have to jump back into perspective, hit Control, Shift and Z to undo that camera move that we just did. And let's make sure that that's still okay. Yeah, so that's fine. Now we can jump back into 4-way view, and let's just see where our light is at. So our light's here. It's just slightly above our spheres, which could be fine. We'll have a look now and see. Also, we need to reset the rotation of this light because it's gone all over the place since we reset the PSR. So let's go into our light, go to the coordinates tab and just reset the rotation back to 0. Cool. So now we can go back into perspective and we can just go forward a bit in our scene. And let's pause it here and let's do a render preview and see what that looks like. So it isn't looking too bad, to be honest. I mean, we could do something with our rocks because, you know, I mean, the shadow, do you know what? It's actually not looking that bad. I think I might just leave it as is. The shadow's being cut off a bit too early here. So what we could do is, and by the way, getting rid of our physical sky object was a good call because this lighting is looking way better. What I might do as well is make the light color something more yellowy so that it looks more like a sun. Yeah, so that looks pretty cool. The shadow, it's being cut off early here, so what we could do is let's go jump out of our camera, and I'm just going to use NB on my keyboard to turn on my lines so I can see our spheres a bit more clearly. So let's make this sphere bigger. Let's do this in object mode, and we can scale that up so that our shadow won't be cut off as early. And I'm just going to rotate this as well a little bit, so it's going to be more visible behind these rocks. And bring it up a little bit as well. Now hopefully that didn't ruin everything for us. So I think that's made a bit of a difference. Our shadow doesn't seem to be getting cut off as much. Yeah, so you guys are welcome to mess around with the rocks to maybe get a better, I don't know, maybe you're not happy with the way your rocks are looking and you want to mess around with them a little bit more. But I'm going to leave mine as is. I think I'm happy enough with mine as well. What I do want to do for a bit more coolness is as our animations, our timeline goes on, I want to increase the count of our clones so they just kind of pop and then suddenly there's more of them. I think that'll look pretty cool. I'm going to turn off my lines as well, NA on your keyboard to do so. So let's say that we want our spheres to kind of pop maybe at around frame 26 or something like that, just as our spheres kind of jump up into the air. So right about here, it's frame 23. I'm going to go into my cloner, go into the object tab, and I'm going to set a keyframe and on the count here, and I'm going to jump forward 1 frame, and we're going to pop up to, let's say, 11, a count of 11 on the X, and maybe 6 on the Y, something like that. And then add another keyframe. So let's see what that looks like. So now it's going to suddenly just pop, and there's more of them. Now, it wasn't much of an increase. Let's maybe go for one of those again. So maybe around frame 63, I'm going to add a keyframe. I'm going to go ahead 1 frame. And then let's go for maybe a bigger jump this time. So I'll go up to 14. a count of 14 on the X, and maybe a count of 8 on the Y. And then add a keyframe again. So let's just watch all of that and see what that's looking like. So our spheres jump up and they pop, and there's more of them, and then they bounce back down again, and then they're going to jump up and pop again, and there's more of them. So that's kind of cool. Hopefully we're not getting any intersections at that second increase of the count. Let's just double check that. Just going to go right up to that keyframe there and see what that's looking like. So the pop happens there. Yeah, and there's no intersections, and that's still looking pretty good, I think. So what I want to do at this stage is I want to kind of focus in on the actual animation, the movement of our spheres and how it's looking. Because for most of this tutorial we've just been looking at it like this, and it's been playing back very slowly. You can see it's not playing back in real time, so the spheres look like they're moving nice and slowly. But if we turn off our background object and play that, we're going to get a closer to real-time playback. And now that we're getting that closer to real-time playback, you can see that the spheres are actually moving a bit too quickly, a bit too erratically. So let's go ahead and fix that now. So we're going to have to go into our vibrate tag, and let's reduce the frequency of that movement to 1. And now if we play that, you'll see that our spheres are moving a bit more slowly, but they're not really doing much jumping anymore because we reduced the frequency there. So we're going to have to increase the amplitude here. I'm going to go up to 1700 on that. And let's play that now. So now our spheres are moving nice and slowly, but we're still getting a few jumps here and there. Now it has actually affected our pops, because if you remember, we set up our pops. Now when I say pops, I mean the increase of the count of the cloner. We set up that to happen here and here, and we set that up so that it would happen just as the cloner jumps up, but that is no longer happening. Now we could move our keyframes around to make that happen again. So what I could do is play that, and we could say that we want it to happen here. Then we just grab our keyframes and just move that over here. So that pop is going to happen there. But I actually don't want to do that, because I think I like the way it's actually just popping as it lands on the rock. You can see that the first pop, it just happens as they're sitting on the rocks. But I like the second pop. The second pop happens, boom, just as it hits the rocks. So I think that's looking pretty cool, so I'm going to stick with that. You guys are welcome to move the keyframes around to change the time at which the pops happen. You can even add in more pops if you like. I'm going to keep mine as is. So that's looking a bit better. The next thing I want to look at is the actual dynamics itself. So if we play this back, you can see we might not be able to see it, but there is some jitteriness going on between the interactions of our spheres. They're kind of acting a bit jittery. So to fix that, we can go into our Dynamics tab, go into the Collision tab, and let's set the bounce to 0. We don't want any bounce in our spheres. Friction, we want more of that, so we go up to 100% on that. And collision noise, we don't want any of that, so we'll put that to 0. Now our spheres are going to be interacting a lot more smoothly. Cool. So now that I'm happy with the actual animation itself of the spheres, I want to kind of focus in on, well, I want to do a few test renders. So I'm going to turn back on my background object, and if you remember, when we were setting up these rocks, we were just kind of dragging spheres in our scene and kind of moving them around and hoping for the best. And to be honest, it didn't give us the worst result. But we're going to do a few test renders now just to see if we can kind of improve how this looks overall. See if there's any tweaks we can make to our rocks to make this look a bit more realistic. So first of all, I'm going to jump into my render settings. Now, we do need to take note that this was a 4K video that we're using for this project. So the output settings are quite high. The dimensions are quite high, so it is going to increase render times on that. But we are going to get a nice 4K render at the end of it. So for our test renders, we don't want to save that. We don't want to render all frames. We just want to render the current frame. Anti-Aliasing, leave that at geometry for now. We will probably have to turn that up when we're doing our real render. And everything else is fine. And now we can do some test renders. So let's just go back to frame 0, and then we can say, okay, I want to do a test render at frame 28. So I'm just going to do a render to picture viewer. And we can wait and see what this is looking like. Okay, so this isn't looking too bad. Now you might say it's looking pretty bad, but remember we are zoomed in on a 4K render at 100%. Realistically, we're only going to be looking at this like this. This is how we're going to be looking at it. So when you're not zoomed in fully, you can't see all of the minor, faults that you can see when we are zoomed in at 100%. But we're going to be doing this at 100% anyway, and we're going to see how we get on. So for this frame, I am happy with this frame. Obviously, we're getting the jagged edges along our shadows because, well, we haven't turned on anti-aliasing. So we'll fix that towards the end. But we can do another test render on a different frame. This time I want to go and wait until my spheres jump up. Let's get them at their highest point, which is here. Let's do another test render there and see what that's looking like. Okay, so we can see the shadow straight away is doing something that it shouldn't be. It's traveling along one of our spheres that we've created, one of our rocks, but it should kind of be dipping down and even maybe slightly traveling up along this this vertical rock here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to we're going to have to make whatever sphere that we're using to represent this rock here, we're going to have to line it up a bit better with this rock. So let's do that now. So this is a sphere that's given us trouble. It's a bit too big and it's not lined up at all with the rock that it's trying to represent. So let's line it up now a bit more closely. And let's do another render to picture viewer on that. Okay, so that's looking a bit better. So you can see that our shadow is being cut where our rock is actually ending, which is good. Now, it'd be nice if we could get some shadows up along the face of this huge rock here. So we can create some geometry up along this rock here. So let's do that now. I'm just going to duplicate this rock, rock 4, and I'm going to use my move tool, hover over one of these axis handles, hold down control, and just drag that. Now we don't want to drag it too far. We want it to still be intersecting with this rock that we just duplicated it from. And now R on your keyboard to get your rotate tool. And let's rotate that something like 84 degrees, something like that. And we can scale this now. We're going to reduce the width of it. And let's just rotate it slightly around the Y. And I'm using spacebar to switch between currently selected tool and previously selected tool. Move that back a little bit. I do want to keep checking this, that I'm not actually, yeah, that's still intersecting. And we can bring that up along the Y. And we can even scale this up just a little bit along the Y. So let's render to picture viewer on that again and see what it looks like. Cool. So now we're getting some shadows traveling up along the vertical, this huge vertical rock. And that's just selling it a bit more. Now we might want to bring our sphere, this rock, over a bit so that it's lining up a bit more closely to the edge here. This edge right here. I'll zoom in on that. This edge right here, we want it to kind of line up a bit more closely with that edge. So let's just move it over, I suppose. We can even rotate it so it's kind of easier to line up. And something like that. Let's try that and see what that looks like. Okay, so that's looking, I think I might have preferred the other one. But yeah, it's still not really lined up as well as it could. And also, this edge is way too smooth, so we're going to have to fix that as well. We don't want this perfect edge here. We need to fix that. So what we can do is, let's just reduce the width of this and rotate it. I'm going to rotate it back up so it's more kind of pointing upwards, more vertical along this rock edge here. And I'm going to move it up a bit as well. And to kind of mitigate this, this problem we're having with this perfectly straight shadow edge, what we can do is we can use a displacer deformer. So let's grab one and let's make it a child of this rock 5. And we can go to the shading tab and we can grab a noise. And let's open that up. Let's increase the global scale to something like around 250-260%. Let's go back one level, go to the object tab, and we can increase the height of this. So you can see we're getting some displacement on that sphere there as I'm increasing the height. So that's going to break up our shadow a bit. Now it's a bit too jagged, so we need to put this rock into a subdivision surface object. Select the rock, hold down Alt, and then grab your subdivision surface object. Don't release Alt until you have added the subdivision object, and now it'll automatically be added as a parent of the selected object. Okay, so it's smoothed out the geometry. So let's render the picture viewer on that. Let's have a look at what that's looking like. So that's looking way better straight away. So still some things we need to tidy up, like, let's see, so because we have displacement in that rock, it's given us some shadows that we don't want to see. We don't want this rock to cast any shadows of its own. So let's go into the rock 5's compositing tag. Go to the tag tab and turn off cast shadows. That'll solve that issue for us there. It's given us those kind of it's given us shadows that it's casting by itself. We don't want that to happen. And we need to increase the scale of this as well. So bring it up, scale it up along the Y so it travels a bit further up along the edge of this rock here. So we'll do that now. Just scale that up along the Y and then just move it up again further. So now if we render the picture on that, we should have gotten rid of these shadows, and hopefully we're going to get more of a shadow up along there as well. So that's looking way smoother there. We're not getting that horrible edge anymore. So let's see. Now I don't want to be tweaking this forever. So we could be tweaking this forever. We could say, well, we need to put another rock here so that it blocks the view of this shadow. Well, we could actually just do that. We probably will be tweaking this forever. But we could just grab, say, rock 3 and just hold down Control over the axis handle, drag that out, drag it forward a bit. So now we should block the shadow. So if we line it up with this line here, you can see that that's actually a rock. So if we line that up there and render the picture viewer on that, hopefully we're going to mask the shadow so that it's kind of masking it, but it needs to be brought up a little bit more. So we'll do that now. A bit more up there. That was probably too far. So this is what I mean about us tweaking this forever and ever and ever. Yeah, it's okay. We need to reduce the, do you know what? I think I'm just gonna go back to, I'm just gonna delete that rock because it was actually fine the way it was. And we do have to remember that. So this is the one that we're looking at. We do have to remember that we're zoomed in on a 4K render at 100%, when in reality, this is how it's going to be looking. And that is going to be looking fine. For me anyway. Now, for all you perfectionists out there, you might want to keep tweaking that so that you're cutting that shadow off with another piece of geometry. Alternatively, you could wait until we get into After Effects and just mask it out as well. That would be a bit more time consuming as well. Anyway, let's move on. So this rock is kind of going a bit too far. We need to bring this down so that it's lining up more closely with this real rock. So let's do that now. This rock, which is here, we need to bring that down. We might even rotate it a little bit that way. Bring it over a little bit and up. See if we can line it up a bit more closely with the rock that it's meant to be representing. And have a look at that. Yeah, so that's lined up a bit better. What else are we doing? So some of our rocks are casting shadows, and we don't want that to happen. Let's see. So if I just jump between the previous render and the current render, yeah, you can see that's lined up a lot better. But for some reason it's actually affecting the other shadows as well. And do you know what? It doesn't look that bad, to be honest. It actually looks a bit better. Well, you might argue it looks worse. Okay, so let's undo that move that we just did there. Because I did rotate it, and that could have been what caused the issue. So I'm just going to bring it down this time and over a little bit. And let's see if we're kind of gone. I'm trying to get it back to this render here, because I don't know what. Ah, I see. Okay, so for some reason our cloner has actually changed as well. Anyway, I don't know why our cloner changed. We didn't actually play the scene. What I mean is the positioning of our spheres changed between renders. That seems to be happening with each render. Okay, don't know the reason for that. But anyway, I'm happy with this latest render here. This is looking a lot better. Let's zoom in again. I just double clicked to zoom in and out, by the way. And we're getting a bit of weirdness here, aren't we? So what I want to do is, yeah, we're getting some strangeness here as well. Look, so let's go back into our Cinema 4D scene. Let's select all of our composition tags. Go into the tag tab and turn off cast shadows. We don't want any of our rocks to be cast in shadows. Let's render the picture viewer on that. And we'll see what that's looking like. Okay. Okay, so we got rid of a lot of the weirdness there. You can see by turning off cast shadows there. So I'm just flicking between the previous render and the current render. And yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. Now, we need to see this shadow edge here. This rock is too smooth. It's a sphere. So we need to do the same thing with this rock. and probably this rock. We need to do the same thing with these two rocks that we did with this rock. So we use a displacement, geez, I always forget the name of these things. What do we call them? Deformer. Yeah, so we use a Displacer Deformer on rock 5. So what we can do is, now I made this editable by mistake, so I don't know how I did that. Don't worry about that if you didn't make your one editable. It doesn't need to be. So we're going to grab this Displacer Deformer and we're going to duplicate it so that it's a child of this rock and of this rock. So let's do that now. Hold down Control to duplicate, make it a child of rock 4, and then this one we can hold down Control and duplicate, make it a child of rock 3. So now we're going to get some displacement on both of those rocks, but they're too jagged now, so we need to make the rocks children of a subdivision surface object. Hold down Alt to do that automatically, as long as the object in question is selected. And if you look over at the object manager, rock 3 is selected. I'm holding down Alt, getting my subdivision surface and releasing my click, and that'll automatically make it a parent. I'm going to do the same for rock 4. So let's render the picture viewer on that now, and we should be seeing that our shadows edges are not going to be so smooth there anymore. Okay, so that's kind of done a great job for us. Now this shadow is kind of overlapping the edge of this rock, so but it is still looking better than the previous render, definitely. And I think I'm going to leave it there, guys, for tweaking the rocks anyway. So I want to set this up for render, bring it into After Effects and add in our logo here, whatever logo. I'm just going to add in a bit of text that's going to be stuck onto the rock face here as well inside of After Effects. Now again, there is a few things that could be looking better. I don't know what's causing this line here really. So there are a few bits and bobs that could be looking better, but this is going to be an animation. People are not going to be focused in on one single frame like we're doing right now, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm happy enough with it as it is now. So let's just close down our picture viewer and we will play ahead there and see. Let's just do one more render to picture viewer here, because we had that pop there, that increase of clones. So I just want to see what that is looking like as well before we commit to say that we're fully happy with this. So I think we're getting some shadows there that shouldn't be there. Let's see what's causing that. Is it this rock here? Could very well be. Yeah, it is actually. So we're going to have to reduce the scale of that here. This is rock 4. I'm going to scale this down along the y-axis here. And I'm going to bring it back further, and let's have a rendered picture viewer on that. See if, because this shadow here, it's looking strange being there. You can see that it is looking weird being there, so we want to get rid of that. So I have gotten rid of it. Now we have a shadow over here, which, you know what, I think I'm going to leave it there, to be honest. Let's see, we could just move this rock back ever so slightly and do another render to picture viewer. Now I think I'm stuck in the trap of constant tweaking now, so I am going to get out of it. I'm not going to do, even if I don't like this render, I'm just going to move on. Okay, so yeah, okay, so now we're getting some shadows over here. I think it's okay. I'm moving on. I'm going to move on, guys. Hopefully this doesn't look too rough when we're rendering this out. This rock is too smooth though. We're going to have to put a displacer on this rock as well. So that rock here is a bit too smooth. I'm going to grab this displacer, hold down Control, duplicate it up, make it a child of rock 1, and then we're going to put this into a subdivision surface object. I just held down Alt there to do that automatically. And while I'm making the final tweaks, I might just bring this rock a bit further out. And okay, so I'll bring this one maybe back a little bit as well. Okay, so that's it, guys. Definitely, I'm not making any more tweaks, but I am going to do one more final render to picture viewer to see what that's looking like. So fingers crossed, it's the render from heaven, and we're happy with it. Okay, it's gotten rid of so we have gotten rid of these weird looking shadows there, but there is some strangeness going on here. But I am sticking with it. As I said, I'm sticking with it. So this is our render, and we're sticking with it. Now we can do some fiddling inside of After Effects if we want to kind of tidy it up a bit if needs be, but this is what we're going with. So here we go. So I'm just going to do a Control S to save my scene, and I'm going to open up my render settings, go to output, and I'm going to set this to all frames. Oh, before I do that, we do need to check render times because we haven't been doing that actually. So let's turn off our background because we're not going to be rendering out our background. And let's do a render to picture viewer on that and see what our render times are looking like. So we're getting about half a minute. You can see from the previous render we're getting about half a minute per frame. So we can bring that down a good bit if we let's just see how long this one takes now, first of all. But we will be able to bring that render time down a good bit. We didn't turn on anti-aliasing yet, so we're going to have to do that now. Anti-aliasing, we're going to set it to best, and 2x2 should be fine. Let's see what that looks like. So looks like before we turned on, we set anti-aliasing to best, we're getting 28 seconds a frame. That's going to increase now, but we are going to get some smoother shadows, and we're going to get some smoother reflections. You can see that that's looking a bit rough. If I just flick between them, we're getting some extra pixels that we don't want in there. But we're hugely increasing the render time there. We're up to like almost 50, yeah, it looks like almost 50 seconds a frame. Now we have to bring that down. So back into render settings, go to options and go to the reflection depth. Bring that down to 2, and let's try that again. Now that's gonna reduce our render times quite a bit. Bringing down reflection depth is always a good way to just knock out a good few seconds out of render times. So it should have knocked out a good bit of time for us. Yeah, so we're down to 26 seconds now on that, down from 48. So I'm happy enough with 26 seconds per frame. Back into my render settings then, so we have output, we're going to set that to all frames, and we are going to save this as a PNG sequence, and we can find a place for this. I'm going to create a new folder, just call it sequence, and call it sequence again. let's turn on alpha channel, multipass, anti-aliasing. Everything else is good to go. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to put in shadow multipass. Now I don't know if this will actually help us in compositing, but it might. We'll see when we bring it into After Effects. So I'm going to turn on shadow for a multipass. This is going to render out our shadows as a separate pass, so we'll be able to control them separately in After Effects. We have to go back to save and change the format to PNG for that multipass render, and then we need to select a location for that. So I'm just going to save that in my sequence folder, in a folder called passes, and just call that passes. That's it, guys. Do a Control S to save again, and I think we're ready to render this out. Yes, I committed. I pressed the button finally. So hopefully this doesn't look rubbish once we bring it into After Effects, and it's as well, we didn't give it time, so let's stop that. So do you know what, it doesn't really matter. I was going to say, we might as well do it now anyway. What we need to do is at frame 0, our dynamics needs a bit of time to kind of do their thing. So if I go forward like about 4 frames, it needs about 4 frames to just kind of, you know, do its thing and relax into place. So let's just go -4 on this. And I'm actually glad that I went back and did this, because there's something else that I forgot to do. We are currently rendering out all frames. We don't need to render out all frames. We just need to render as far as... So you can see when it gets to frame 0, everything's popped in. We just need to render as far as the point where... Okay, so this is really slowing up right now. So I'm just going to skip ahead. Yeah, so see this huge rock that's coming in our foreground? So we don't need to render anything past the point at which our huge foreground rock has covered up all of our geometry, our rocks and everything else. So that covers up everything at around frame 133. So we can change the frame range here to just be -4 to 133. And if we go back into our render settings now, we can see that if we go into output, that's automatically changed. So it's 0 to 133, and now we're ready to render. Control S to save that. And finally, render to picture viewer. This is already calculating, stop that, and we're going to overwrite. Okay, so we finally got there. It was a hell of a ride and loads of tweaking, and hopefully when we bring this into After Effects, it's actually going to look good. We will see. I'm a bit iffy, so we'll see. It might look okay. We'll see anyway. But I'm going to pause the video here, and this is going to render away. It's rendering away there at about 25 seconds per frame. Once it's all done, we'll hop into After Effects. So I'll see you guys in After Effects in a second. Okay guys, so that has finished rendering, and we're going to hop into After Effects now. Now, if any of you want to download that sequence, you're welcome to download it. I provided a link in the description below, just in case you guys don't want to wait for your render and want to continue on following along with the tutorial. So here's my render anyway. This is my sequence, fully rendered out. All the frames are there, and you guys can download that below in the description. Okay, so let's hop into After Effects, and this is where it all began. This is where we began at the beginning of the tutorial. We still have our landscape 4K video. We have our 3D tracker camera. We have our track solid. So now we're going to import in our sequence. So let's just double click on the project panel, and we can go and find our sequence. And I have it here, and we're just going to import that in. Okay, so I want to hit Ctrl-Alt-G to open up the Interpret Footage dialog box here. And we can see that the frames per second is coming in at 30 frames per second. Now, that's not what we want. We want to match it up with, so Control-Alt-G, I'm just selecting the video here in my project panel, Control-Alt-G. This is what it needs to be set to. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to Control-Alt-G again to open up the interpret footage and paste in that frame rate. So that's going to match up nicely. Hit OK there, and now we can drag this sequence down into our composition. Okay, so there it is, it's in. We can go back to the beginning here. Now, there's something going on at the very beginning here. It looks like our video doesn't start matching up until about frame 2 or 3. So what I'm doing to scrub like this, to scrub with my timeline indicator here, is I'm just holding down Control, using my right and left arrow keys while I'm holding down Control. So just in case you guys are seeing this kind of a layout, you can just bring your effects panel back over beside your project tab there. And yeah, so let's go and zoom in on this a little bit more. Spacebar to get your hand, to use your hand tool to pan. And now we can use Control and the right arrow key to just kind of scrub along the timeline. So you can see what's going on here. So we're just going to cut off the beginning, well, not cut it off, but we're going to make our video start at a different time. Our video has to start right about here on frame 2. So let's grab our video and our 3D tracker camera and just hit the left square brackets, and that'll snap the beginning of those layers to the timeline indicator here. So now if we hit B on our keyboard, we can set the work area start, and now we're good to go. We can use Control, Shift and X to trim the comp to the work area. Okay, so now we're good to go on that, and we can see that everything's looking as it should. So I'm just going to hit, let's see, we're just going to go back to fit here on this, and let's hit play. Spacebar to play that. So if you remember from our test renders, yeah, there it is. Once we get that pop, we're getting those unsightly shadows down here. So we are able to mask those out. So it's not going to be too much of a big deal. We'll be able to mask those out and it'll look much better. Also, when our spheres kind of jump up, this shadow is very straight edged, so we could mask that as well. We're also going to have to mask this foreground rock also, and we want to put our logo or whatever text we want to put onto this rock. So let's start by masking out these shadows that we don't really want to see. So these kind of ones down here, these here as well. So I'm going to go zooming into about 50%, and let's go back to the beginning. Actually, no, we'll go to where the shadows are so we can see what we're masking. Let's grab our pen tool, and we can just start kind of drawing around. Now make sure that your sequence is selected before you start drawing these anchor points, and let's just start creating our mask. So clicking and dragging to get a curve there. So we want to be able to see this vertical rock as well, because remember, when these spheres jump up, we are going to see a bit of shadow being cast on this vertical rock as well. So we want to make sure our mask is going to have space to encapsulate that as well. So something like this will be good for our mask. Now, the edge is very crisp and we want to soften it so we can feather this mask. So let's go to our sequence and just click on that drop down there and go down to the masks drop down and again mask 1. And let's increase the feather here to soften that edge. So something like that. So you can see that that's already looking a lot better. If I just turn off the mask up, let's see, invert that, you can see what we're getting rid of. So we're getting rid of these shadows that just look out of place. So that's looking way better. What we have to do now is animate this mask so that it remains in the correct position and is hiding everything we want it to hide as it goes along through the animation. So let's just start doing that now. We can create a keyframe on the mask path property here, just around the center point of this animation. Just create a mask path keyframe, and then let's go back to the beginning, and I'm just going to zoom out here as well a bit, and we can use our selection tool and just grab all of those anchor points, and then we can bring that mask back. And just keep an eye on where you're putting your mask. If you put it up too high, you're going to be removing too much of the shadows. And if you put it too low, you're going to be seeing some of the shadows that we don't want to see. So put it in a position that you're liking, and then the keyframe here is automatically created. So now if we just scrub through that, we can keep an eye on where our mask positioning is, and if we're happy with it. So I might just move this anchor point kind of up a little bit, kind of like that, ever so slightly, and that'll automatically create another keyframe. So we can just scrub through that again. So now when our spheres jump up into the air, we're still getting our shadow. We're still able to see our shadow because our mask is big enough to encapsulate that. So that's fine. We can keep scrubbing along right to the end, we'll say. Well, maybe not to the very end. To about the point where our big foreground rock comes in. Then we can grab all the anchor points again with our selection tool and just kind of drag that out again to a point at which we're happy with the shadows. So I'm going to go for something like that. And I think I'm happy enough with that. So let's just bring this back to fit. And we can just play that back and see what it's looking like. So still happy enough with the shadows that are being hidden. Happy enough with the shadow up on the wall. We might want to do something about this shadow. It's very, very straight, very vertical. So we probably want to mask that as well. We can do that in a minute. But yeah, that's looking pretty good. And that's fine. So that's our first mask covered. What we can do now is, well, we could mask out that weird shadow we were getting here. But just to mix things up a bit, what we can do is we can put in our logo here. So what we need to do that is we need to go down to select our 4K video, and we need to go to our effects panel and click on the 3D camera tracker. Now we're going to see all of our track points again. And we can just scrub to somewhere near to the beginning of this, and let's find a good target where we want to put our text. So I'm going to go for, let's see, yeah, I'm going to go for maybe this one here. So I'm just looking for a target that looks like it's flat against the surface of this rock face here. And I just clicked on that, right clicked, and now I'm going to left click, or sorry, I left clicked first, and now I'm going to right click and go to create text. So let's have a look at my text. I can just double click on the text layer that was created. So the font I'm using is Impact. You guys can use whatever font you like. Again, if you want to bring in a logo, you'd have to bring in an image and just make it, put it into a 3D space by clicking on this cube, and then what you'd be able to do is just use the pick whip to drag it to the track solid that you'd have to create a track solid. But for this, we're just doing text, so we're not going to worry about that. I'm going to type in the letters JB there. And I'm going to reposition this kind of over a bit, kind of more central in the rock. Bring it down a bit maybe. Something like that. Oh. Yeah, something like that. And we can just watch that back. So yeah, that's looking cool enough. I might just kind of bring it further in along the X there. Just center it as best I can on the rock. And I also want to create, add a drop shadow. So just go to your Effects and Presets tab here. If you guys can't actually see that, what you can do is go to Window and where is it? It's Effects and Presets. Just click on that, it'll pop up for you. And I'm going to search for drop shadow. And here it is here. Let's drag this down to my JB text layer. And I want to increase the distance, maybe a little, up to something like 13. And the softness, I'm going to bring that up to about 15. Maybe even more on the softness. Yeah, something like that. Let's just have a watch of that then. Cool. Okay, so I'm happy enough with how that's looking. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is mask this shadow that we're getting here. So I'm going to zoom in 100% on this. And yeah, so this shadow is what I want to kind of mask. It's looking weird, so I'm just going to mask it and kind of get it to line up with the edge of this rock, which is what we were trying to do in cinema, but it just wasn't panning out very well for us. And we just got tired of it, I suppose. Well, I did anyway. So hop back into the, there's no need to hop back into the project tab, but anyway, I did it anyway. And now we're going to grab our pen tool again and select the sequence layer. And I'm just going to start drawing along the edge of this rock as best as I can. I'm not going to be too perfect about this now, really, at all. Now, if you guys don't know how I'm getting these curves in my mask, you need to watch a tutorial on using the pen tool in Adobe products and Bezier curves and all that good stuff. But I'm sure most of you know exactly what you need to do to get those curves. And now we have mask 2, right? So we have mask 1, which is masking our shadows. We have mask 2 now, which is kind of masking this weird shadow here just separately. And I might just lock mask 1 so that we're not able to select it. Now what we can do is just unravel mask 2 and create a keyframe here on mask path. And now we can just start scrubbing along our timeline and seeing what we are going to do with this. So I might just go back to that keyframe. You can hold down Shift while you're scrubbing to snap to keyframes. And we need to set this to subtract before we do anything else. So that's going to subtract away that shadow. Let's select all of our anchor points with our selection tool and just bring that up a little bit so that we're not cutting off this shadow here. We want to keep that. Something like that. Okay, so I'm just going to try and line up these anchor points a bit better now again, because I've moved my mask up. So that's fine. Again, not being too perfect with it. We have our keyframe set, so let's scrub along to about here. We can grab this now and get rid of that sharp edge again. We need to we don't need to feather this because we're getting rid of it along the edge, so we want it to be nice and sharp. I'll just line this up a bit better. And keep going. And then the shadow just kind of falls down there towards the end. But we do want to kind of get it a bit at the end as well. So I think that's doing the job for us. So at the beginning, we don't want this mask anywhere near any of our stuff. So what we can do is at the very, let's say, just the frame before the first keyframe, we can just, let's go back to 50%. We can just grab this mask and just pull it up out of the way completely. Get it out of there. And now it'll jump down into place when it's needed. So it's actually going to be needed a bit earlier than that. So let me just undo that last keyframe, Control Z on your keyboard. And we do actually need it a bit earlier. So I'm going to go into 100% again. Let's bring this back. And just grab all our anchor points. Oh, maybe we didn't need it actually. Okay, so let's see what that's looking like. Okay, so I think that's looking better. So we do need to get rid of it after the last keyframe. So right about here we need to get rid of it. So let's go back to fit and just select it, all of the anchor points, just bring it up out of the way there. And now it is gone. So now we can have a watch of that, see what that's looking like. And I think that our mask is gonna do its thing, and we're not gonna see, we're not seeing that sharp edged shadow any longer. So that's good. Now you guys can spend a bit more time kind of, so we're getting that edge back again there now. So we're gonna need it again. Just around here, it needs to come down again. So we're going to select all of them. Let's actually just make a keyframe by clicking add keyframe icon here. And then Control and your right arrow to go forward one frame. Then we're going to bring this down because it's going to be needed any second. I'm going to zoom in to 50% here. And I'm just going to use Control and the right arrow to just scrub and see what we are going to do with this. So right about here, we need to be masking this edge. Now you might say that you don't want to use this mask and you don't want to mask out that shadow because it kind of looks like it's casting a shadow on a rock perfectly. This rock does have a pretty straight edge, but I'm not liking it, so I'm getting rid of it. I'm masking it out. And again, Control and my right arrow to just scrub along. And then we're going to move that back over there. So let's see how that did. Yeah, so that's doing a pretty good job of keeping that sharp edged shadow away from us. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go back to fit again. Just going to watch that now again. It's looking good now. There's a bit of weirdness there. Look, we can see that right there, it looks like. Yes, so let's kill off that weirdness there. It's right here. You can see that there's I'll just zoom in again on that. This pointy shadow here, so we need to mask that out. So where is our mask when you need it? So we need to select our sequence layer. And oh yeah, so our mask has jumped up, I believe, if I zoom back out. Yeah, so our mask has jumped out. So we're going to need to bring it down again. I'm going to select mask 2 before we try and select the anchor points, then select all of them, drag it down and get rid of that weirdness there. Scrub through again, so that weirdness is gone. And then the mask leaves as it's no longer needed. Let's play that again. So we're getting more weirdness there. Just going to scrub back. Where is that weirdness? Right there. So let's zoom in again. And let's find the weirdness. So where is the weirdness? So I think we just need to move our mask over a little bit. Yeah, we're going to have to move it over here a little bit. Still a bit of weirdness creeping up at that point, so I got rid of it, I think, there. Yeah, okay, so it's gone, I think. Yeah, I think it's gone now. So back to fit, and we'll just watch that one more time. So I think we're good for cleaning up that weirdness there. We're still going to need it right at the end, of course. Of course we are. So yeah, we're going to need it about there. So what we can do is select all of our anchor points again and just bring it over to get rid of that sharp edged shadow there again. Just scrub using Control and the left arrow key and Control and the right arrow key to scrub forward. And are we going to need it one more time? I think we're good then. Okay, cool. Now the last part of this is we want to mask out everything once this foreground rock comes into our scene. So let's just go to about frame 118, and then let's create a mask and try and draw around this rock as best we can. So let's zoom in a bit here, maybe even more actually, go to 50% on that. And we don't need to be very careful along the top, because we just need to kind of be careful where this is going to go over our spheres. So along this edge we kind of need to be a bit more precise with our mask. So let's just go ahead and set this up now. We want to be a bit precise as well up here, because we're going to be masking this JB. We're going to be masking the JB text also. Now, to reduce the length of these handles here, you can just hold down Alt, and you can reduce the length of those there. You're probably wondering, well, if you don't know much about Bezier and using the pen tool, you're probably wondering, well, why do I want to reduce the length of that? But that's a whole other story, a whole other tutorial. And okay, so again, trying to get this as close as I can without being too perfect either, because this rock is going to be moving pretty fast. So we're not going to notice too much. We're not going to notice it too much if it's not exactly along the edge. Okay, so just zoom out a bit there. That's cool. Let's just close this mask now. Okay, so now we have our mask for our foreground rock, and we can lock mask 2, which is this mask here, because we don't want to be grabbing that by accident. Let's scroll down here to mask 3 and unravel this, create a keyframe here, mask path, and we want to bring this to the very beginning and just kind of bring this out. Use our selection tool, just select all of the anchor points of that mask. Just bring that over to the left, because we're not going to need it until this keyframe here. So hold down Shift to snap to keyframes as you're scrubbing. Now we can start animating this mask. So let's just scrub along. And might zoom out a bit. Here we go. Yeah, we'll zoom out. That's too much. I'm going to use my zoom tool, Z on your keyboard, to bring up your magnifying glass, and then we can kind of just click to get a better zoom on that. I'm gone for 25%. Grab my selection tool and let's just scrub a bit more. So okay, so our mask has actually disappeared after this part because our sequence layer has finished. So that's why our mask has disappeared. So it probably would make more sense to no, we're going to have to create two separate masks. We're going to have to create a mask for the spheres, and then we're going to have to create a separate mask on our JB layer to mask out the text, which is just wonderful. Just creates more work for us. So aren't we lucky? Okay, so let's just do that now. Let's find that first keyframe, which is here. Scrub along to the very point at which all of our shadows are hidden by the foreground rock. Select all of our anchor points of our mask and let's just drag this over. And now we can zoom in a bit. Z on your keyboard to open up your magnifying glass, your zoom tool. And I'm going to select this mask again. Just hit Control A and that should select all your anchor points for you. They're probably already selected anyway. And then just try and line that up a bit better. So now we can scrub using Control and the left arrow key. I'm just going to go back to the first keyframe, which is here. And I'm just going to start scrubbing through this now to see how our mask is doing with lining itself up. Okay, so we didn't set this to subtract, so it's not actually taking away anything. So let's do that now. And let's try again. So let's start scrubbing. So we need to do a bit of fixing here. We grab these anchor points and move this closer to the edge. Scrub again. Maybe need to move this one a little bit down. Scrub again. I'm using the Control and the right arrow key. I think that's fine. Just going to continue on doing it like this. Okay. So that's everything masked out by our foreground rock for our spheres anyway. So now we're going to have to do the same for our JB text. So we need to, again, we're going to have to select our JB text layer. And I'm going to quickly do this now. I'm not going to take much time to create this mask. This is going to be very rough indeed. I say very rough and then I take my time. But anyway, that's the way it goes. Something like that. And let's just close this mask now. Let's unravel the JB text logo and unravel masks and mask 1. Set this to be inverted, I think we'll do it. And then if we grab an anchor point, we should be masking out that JB as we are. Okay, cool. So let's set a keyframe here on mask path. And let's just scrub this over until the foreground rock covers the JB text. And I'm going to grab all of these anchor points, just drag this over to the left. And then we're just going to use Control and our left arrow keys to scrub and fix up what needs to be fixed up. So I'm going to zoom in a bit for this. Control right arrow key, and I'm just going to start fixing this up as quickly as I can. Okay, cool. So that's that. That's everything. What I want to do for the finishing touch is, well, we'll just watch it first and see what it's looking like. Make sure everything is looking as it should. And for the finishing touch, what I mean by the finishing touch is what I want to do is I want to kind of blur out the spheres just before the foreground rock covers over them, just like kind of what would happen if a real video camera was looking out at them. Just as the foreground comes into the view, what would happen is the camera would autofocus on the foreground rock and would defocus on the spheres and the JB text. So I'm going to set that up now. So around about frame 110, I'm going to search for a Gaussian blur in the effects panel. And I'm going to apply this. Let's just select the JB text layer, do a Control A, and just hit U on your keyboard twice to just fold everything up. So we have our Gaussian blur searched for. Here it is. And let's apply this to our sequence. Just drag that down. And now if we add a keyframe here, make sure you're in your effects panel. If you're in your project panel, just click on this double arrow here and click on the effect panel. Let's add a keyframe here on blurriness. And let's scrub right to the point before the foreground kind of goes over our spheres. Then we can bring up the blurriness to something like 9, maybe 8.5. Something like that. And that'll automatically add a keyframe. If I select the sequence layer here and hit U on my keyboard, it'll show us all the keyframes. Scroll down to the bottom, you can see we have 2 keyframes here for blurriness. So now, if we just watch that part, the rock's going to come in and that's going to blur out and it's going to go over it. And we want to do the same for the JB text. So let's go select JB text, grab the Gaussian blur effect down onto it. Let's go to about this point here. And we can set a keyframe here in the Gaussian blur on the blurriness property at around frame 126 and go to the point just before the foreground rock covers the JB text, and let's bring the blurriness up to 8.5, I suppose. Again, on that might be too much for the text, maybe a bit less. We'll go 6.5, something like that, and we'll automatically have our 2 keyframes. Select the layer, hit U, and you'll see the 2 keyframes are in there now. So I think that's it, guys. All that we have left to do now is kind of watch this. Well, we need to set an end point, a point at which we want to stop our video. We need to set an end point for our composition. So I'm going to end it at around here. Just hit N on your keyboard, do a Control-Shift-X to trim the comp to the work area. I'm going to go for fit so we can watch this back. Oh, and one more thing as well, just a little cherry on top. Go back into your project panel and I'm going to provide this sound effect in the description below. You'll be able to download it. I got it from Freesound. It is just the sound of a train. So let's open that up and drag it down to our composition and hit spacebar to watch this. So we've got a bit of wind going on in the background. I think the train part doesn't come until the very end of this. Anyway, let's see what that's looking like. Just going to let this load fully into RAM, so we're going to get a real-time playback. Okay, so we're not getting our train sound effect, but it is there. You just have to drag this layer a bit further along. There it is there, yeah. So we'll watch that again. Okay, so that's it, guys. All that's left to do now is composition and add that to your Adobe Media Encoder queue to render that out. So I hope you learned a lot watching the video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.